Good evening, everybody. There is a massive thunderstorm outside right now, and it's making a lot of great ambient noise to sit inside and play some fighting games, so that's what I'm gonna do. But it tends to rumble really loudly, so if you hear some loud noise, that's probably what it is. Before I jump online and play some Miguel today, I'd like to talk to you about Gigas, specifically kind of the big character archetype in Tekken and why Gigas is not considered to be a very powerful character in this game. I think it is a little bit less intuitive than you might think. If you follow my stuff, you know I really like the sort of big, heavy character archetype. I think it's a lot of fun. It's very satisfying to play these big, heavy hitters. But unfortunately, these characters tend to find themselves very low in the tier lists in most cases. And so I want to talk a little bit about that and then about Gigas specifically. Unfortunately, Gigas is not enjoying a lot of popularity right now, and I think the main reason is that he is considered to be a little bit of a weak character. Unfortunately, in Tekken, the characters that tend to be shown love and development from the developers of Tekken are the characters that are popular, and so we are kind of running the risk of not seeing Gigas carried forward into future games, which I think is very sad. And you know, the main man made that video a while back where he was like, very low character popularity, no Gigas in Tekken 8 question mark. And he has a point. We're actually running the risk of losing Gigas, which I think is very sad because there are a lot of cool and unique things going on with this character. So I think if we're just going to talk about big characters in general, I think one of the reasons they tend to be considered weak in a lot of these games is that you would actually categorically in most fighting games rather be maneuverable and technical than be slow but have heavy damage. So what I mean by that is if you're designing a character and you are decreasing their mobility and you're sort of making them slower, and you're then balancing that out by giving them more damage on their attacks, you're actually kind of making the character weaker because those things don't balance out equally. That is especially true because, okay, say for example that you hit 4 times with an attack that does 5 damage in Tekken, it's going to be 20 damage, and that's the same damage as if you hit once with an attack that does 20 damage, but unfortunately damage doesn't tend to be distributed that evenly in Tekken. It tends to come in these large chunks called combos, and so your ability to set up and create those opportunities for those combos is usually what makes your character a lot more powerful, at least in most cases, with most characters. And so it doesn't really matter if you're able to dish out a lot of damage on individual hits if you're not able to create opportunities, right? So you don't want to be a slow character, and fortunately the developers of Tekken know this because Gigas is not a slow character, and the big characters that we have are not slow in the sense that they don't have a lot of startup frames on their attacks. Gigas is a big character, but he's actually very explosive. He has the 1-2, which is 10 frame move, so you know, one of the fastest moves in the game, but it does massive damage and really hurts the opponent. So he has the 4-4-2 and stuff like this. He's very explosive in a lot of ways. So the way they tend to make them slower in quotation marks is that they don't really have a very favorable close-up game because their fast poking stuff tends to have more recovery frames on block than a typical character who enjoys poking in the close-up game. Like your Katarina, your Law, your Steve, or whatever. And so what that tends to mean is that these characters, while they are powerful, they're not super good at keeping up with fast-paced gameplay in the close-up game. So what do you do to balance that out? Well, what they've done in Tekken, at least I think if I look at the design of these characters, it seems as though they're trying to balance that out by giving the characters a massive amount of range, especially on their punching attacks. The 3 big characters in Tekken right now, Bears, Gigas, and Jack, are all known for having stumpy legs, but I think it's actually more about the fact that they want them to get long range on their punching attacks, so they have to give them massive upper bodies, and it creates this sort of skewed body shape. And if you think about specifically whiff punishment, some of the best and most long range 15 frame whiff punishment in the game exists on these characters because you have down 2 from Gigas, which is fantastic, the famously amazing down 4-2 from Jack, and then down 4-2-1 from Kuma, which I think is actually the longest range move out of all of them. So Why is this the case? Yeah, you suffer in the close-up game and you're not able to really keep up there. But out here, one thing you can do then is, well, there are really two ways you can manipulate the space between yourself and the opponent when you're sort of playing kind of footsies. What most characters will do is that they will try and manipulate the space between you and the opponent by moving in and out of it, mainly using Korean backdashing. But another way you can do it is you can stick out hitboxes into the space between you, and you're very good at doing that if you have massive range, like Jack or Gigas. So it seems as though you have massive range and good whiff punishment, and you're good at manipulating space with your large, long-range hitboxes, but you're not very good at keeping up with a close-up game up here. So you really want to have a lot of space so that you can capitalize on your range, and that is, I think, the design philosophy between for the sort of big Tekken characters. And I think if we're going to talk about Gigas now and why he's not considered to be all that powerful, I think one of the main reasons, I want to sort of dispel a myth here, something that, one of the main reasons I wanted to make the video actually is something that you hear a lot of people say a lot of the time, is that Gigas is weak because he's a big character, because he has limited maneuverability. And I don't really think that's the case. If you play this character and if you play big characters in Tekken, you'll notice that while that is certainly a factor, it's not nearly as big a factor as people make it out to be, and there are actually a lot of other reasons we can talk about here. And my evidence for that being true, my sort of exhibit A, is Jack 7. Jack 7 is a big character, same as Gigas, and he suffers from the same sort of limited mobility that Gigas does. But whereas Gigas is considered to be a very weak character, Jack 7 is very strong. He does extremely well in this game, especially in tournament play. And so if we want to get to the heart of why Gigas is not particularly good, I think the best way of doing that would be to contrast him with Jack 7 and sort of try and find out what the major differences are. And my sort of thesis on this is that we talked about how you want to play this sort of very spaced out sort of long range play style where you're playing a lot of keep out with punishment, and then trying to manipulate the space between you and the opponent with sort of fast and explosive attacks, right? And I think the main difference between Gigas and Jack is that Jack has a move list that just plays perfectly into that playstyle. It's like he has these very effective few moves that completely play into the exact way you would want to play a character like that, and Gigas doesn't really in the same way. And you can see that they've tried to take him sort of in the same direction because he has the massive whiff punishment, he has the explosive gap closers, great running move, and so on. It's just not as good as Jack, and it doesn't function or allow him for that very powerful playstyle the same way that it does for Jack. I think that the main move that makes Jack so good in this game, and we've talked about this before, is his jackhammer 441. And I think the equivalent move that they've given Gigas instead is his 442, which is this move. If we're going to compare these moves, the really powerful thing about the jackhammer is that while it is a gap closer that you would use from sort of the same range that you would use this move, the jackhammer is going to smash your opponent to the ground, give you guaranteed damage for follow-up, a massive chunk of somewhere around 40 damage, so just shy of a combo really, depending on what option you use. And I know not all of the options off of jackhammer are guaranteed, but as you probably know if you watch a lot of Tekken, they tend to work out as though they were guaranteed most of the time effectively. And you can get the windmill punch completely guaranteed. So the damage is there for Jack. Whereas with this move, you get 20 damage and you don't get to really follow up because it just knocks your opponent away. And it leads to effectively about half the damage, making it a lot less dangerous, even though this is still a very, very good move for Gigas. Another thing that is very unfortunate about the 442, which I think is just a little bit of a design mistake with this move really, is that the one big advantage that it has over jackhammer is that this move will actually allow you wall splat for great damage. Problem being that this move is safe because of the fact that it has pushback, and when your opponent's back's to the wall, the pushback will be negated, meaning that this move can get punished on block. So the one really interesting niche and advantage that this move actually had kind of gets negated by its own frame data, and I think that's very unfortunate. I think this move would have made sense even if you just made it -9 on block at all times, even when there's no pushback, and then you could really look for powerful wall spats from a range with this move, which I think would have been really good for Gigas, but that's unfortunate. So, if we're going to talk about the other main reason I don't think Gigas is doing very well competitively right now is that there is a way of shutting him down that is a little bit too easy, and he has a sort of certain range and a certain way that he can't really play, and it tends to really hurt him. And what I'm talking about here is what we mentioned earlier with that close-up game and just the frame data on fast pokes. If you're playing against Gigas online and you want to beat him, one thing you can do is that you can try to stay on top of him very close, and then you can utilize fast safe pokes and do a lot of blocking. And if you do that a lot of the time, Gigas is just not going to be able to keep up with you because of his frame data, because while you have mid pokes that might be something like -2 on block, so you can sort of keep on doing them. And another option you have access to that Gigas doesn't is, you know, poke sidestep or jab sidestep, which is obviously very powerful as well. Whereas Gigas has a lot more disadvantage on a lot of his stuff up here. And so unless he hard reads you and like goes under a high or interrupts something or gets a counter hit with something like you know, this, that's just him outplaying you. Most of the time you are actually at a massive advantage if you're just playing a little bit of a defensive poke war against him up close. And if you block one of his attacks, you're going to get a mix-up a lot of the time, and sometimes he even ends up being punishable. You know, if he does something like a 1-2 to try and get you off him, you can punish that pretty hard. So, if I was to come up with an idea of what you could do to help Gigas and make him a lot more powerful, I would actually want to improve his close-up game to make him more difficult to shut down when you're sort of playing that style against him. And my idea for how to do this is very straightforward. It's something that I've sort of been thinking about for a long time with Gigas. If you look at my gameplay footage of playing Gigas online, you will see that this string, which is what I want to talk about now, down forward 3 1+2, I absolutely destroy people with this string. In the green ranks, in the yellow ranks, like when people are unprepared for the string, it will absolutely annihilate your opponent. If they don't know about the frame data and they're not aware of the mechanics of this move, then it's a complete destroyer. Like, it's a noob killer, really. But when you sort of hit orange ranks with Gigas, quite quickly this move becomes almost completely useless. It's a huge liability, and you can't really use it as soon as you end up playing against people who know their frame data. So if we're going to talk about the move a little bit, first of all, the down forward 3 by itself is a fast mid poke, one of the fastest you have with Gigas. It's a 13 frame move, which is rare for him. You know, he doesn't have a 13 frame down forward 1 and stuff, so this is a very good move for him. And then the 1+2 follow-up, which is this move, is a launcher, and this will hit naturally on counter hit. So if you get a counter hit with the down forward 3, you can get a launch here, which is very powerful. 13 frame close-up counter hit tool like this, very, very good. Problem being that you can't really confirm this, and if they block the 1+2, it's launch punishable on block, I think -16. So it's very, very punishable on block. So if you're looking for this and your opponent is aware that they can block this and launch you, then you're just going to eat a plate of shit every time you try and play it out of order. And so to sort of compensate for that fact, what they've given you is this third follow-up move, which is the 1+2, 1+2. It's a powerful high and knockdown move. And so the theory is that your opponent is going to hesitate to block punish the 1+2 follow-up here, because you might do the final hit, and then they're just going to get knocked down. And you can sort of see that that's the theory behind the move, because they've actually made this final hit sort of delayable like that. So you can see that it's very delayable actually. So it's kind of like designed for being something that you can delay and then catch your opponent with when they're trying to punish your 1+2 kind of thing. Problem being, the reason this doesn't really work out either is the final hit is extremely dangerous and liable as well, because it's a very duckable high. So, if you're trying to apply this very fast and powerful string that might allow you to be very dangerous in the close-up game, you run a huge risk of getting blocked for getting, launched for getting the 1+2 blocked, and then the final 1+2 you can get ducked, and then you're going to get launched as well. So, it's really too much of a risk to be very useful against good players. So what would I do to improve this? Well, I think it's actually kind of easy. I would just make the final hit a mid. If you make the final hit of this string a mid, then they can't really duck that. And then if you make it, if you really want it to be punishable, I think minus 10, minus 11, minus 12 would make sense. I think this string would actually be fine even if you made it safe at something like minus 9. That would be very powerful, but then again, Gigas doesn't have a lot of really powerful stuff, so why not just give him a really good string that allows him to be a more complete character? It's not like other characters in the game lack moves that are, you know, very, very good in terms of their frame data, right? I think that would make a lot of sense, because then you could use this string in the close-up game, and because it's a 13 frame counter hit move that is going to launch your opponent when it connects, the opponent would have to be scared of this and really hit the brakes against Gigas sometimes, making him sort of just able to keep up when you're trying to play these close-up poke wars. So you know what I mean? He would definitely be a character who still tries to rely on his range from like out here to be explosive and to play a lot of whiff punishment and play a lot of gap closing, but then you can't just shut him down by standing next to him. And I think that would really help him a lot, because his low pokes, in my opinion, like his down 3 and his down 3-2, talked about this before, it's one of my favorite low pokes and sort of strings in the game. It's extremely good. The down back 2, despite being kind of slow, is actually very powerful. You know, guaranteed damage on counter hit and everything. Good high crush property. So in terms of lows, even though they're not nearly as good as Jack, he can keep up. He just needs something powerful for the mid game to make him able to not just be shut down by faster characters, because that's how he tends to get messed up, in my opinion. I think this move should be just safe overall. And yeah, those are the quick changes I would make to Gigas to make him a lot more powerful, and I hope they made sense to you and that you sort of agree, because this is a cool character that I would really be sad to see go, because there are so many cool and unique things about him, like, you know, the massive minus frames he puts his opponent at, the rage drive, which gives you a guaranteed mix-up with an unblockable mixed in, the massive throw, the overkill, and everything else. There's so much personality that's gone into making this character. He just needs a little bit more focus in his character design. One thing that made me feel like the developers don't really know how to improve Gigas is that when we went over to FR back in the arcade days, the new move that they gave him is this sidestep 2, which is a super cool move. Does massive damage, has great range, and leads to a huge cool combo when you get it. Problem being that when you're dealing with a character like Gigas, who has so many things you could do to help him, so many new moves that could really benefit him, why would you give him, first of all, a sidestep move when you're dealing with a character that doesn't really sidestep, and then it's also a duckable and punishable high. So you sort of need to get lucky with this move to ever get a hit. When it hits, it's very cinematic and it feels very satisfying, but this is not a good move by any stretch of the imagination. And if I was to come up with one new move I would give Gigas to make him better in this game, this is not what I would come up with, let's say. Alright, I think it's going to wrap up my little discussion on Gigas, and I hope it made sense to you and that you enjoyed it. Now I'm going to go online and play some Miguel, I think, and maybe next time we'll do a character tutorial again, so let me know what you want to see. Thank you so much for watching this one. I'm sorry I've been away for a week. I actually went on a little bit of a holiday because I needed some time off, and I had a great time. But now I'm back, and I'm making videos again, so see you guys again very soon, and thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.